Welcome back to another video in the series of basic schema therapy. And today we are already diving into the fourth basic emotional need, which is the need to feel freedom to express your emotions, your opinions, and your needs. The information is coming mostly from these sources. I find it important in these videos because these are basic videos and I'm not already a very senior schema therapist that you can actually see where all the information is coming from. Then what are we going to talk about today? So when these needs aren't properly met, it can lead to the development of three dysfunctional schemas. And we're going to dive into all three of them in more depth. Firstly, we're going to talk also about what this need actually is. And at the end, we're also going to look a bit at positive schemas. So firstly, the basic need for emotional freedom to express your opinions, it is actually linked to these kind of phenomena. So first of all, emotional attunement, that a child really learns to attune with their own emotions, to develop a language about your emotions. And that is because a parent actually asks a child, hey, how does that make you feel? That can be on a daily basis, but also after more difficult events. Secondly, this is really tied to a child forming their own opinions so that they don't necessarily become like a parrot of what their parents think or what their environment necessarily think, but they really learn how to form their own opinions. So it is also allowed to kind of discuss things with your parents. Then it is about kind of this unconditional love and acceptance. So also when a child is a bit different, maybe from peers or from brothers and sisters or from the family unit, that is allowed by parents, and that parents actually also kind of encourage that for kids to have their own opinions and their needs. In what kind of environment do we typically see that clients develop schemas? That is a bit of the opposite of what I just described. So what we often see is that in kind of parental situations when there is much more unconditional love. So it is not that there isn't love at all, but it is conditional. So a child really learns that, hey, if I am like this, mostly maybe doing what the parents want or fitting into the environment, then I experience love and acceptance. But there are parts of me, of my personality, of the things that I want, that I kind of have to suppress, because otherwise it will be met with criticism, maybe even being ashamed, or being, in severe cases, also more abused. Here you can kind of see the parental, how it is described in the book. I'm gonna paraphrase that. So the typical family origin is based on conditional acceptance. Children must suppress important aspects of themselves in order to gain love, attention, and approval. In many such families, the parents' emotional needs and desires, or social acceptance and status, are valued more than the unique needs and feelings of each child. So this is also often about having a certain image from parents or status to the outside world, when parents really have this clear idea about what is right or wrong, and how a kid should be and should not be. And a kid really learns that they have to kind of mold into that to feel loved and accepted. It wouldn't be a surprise that if a child grows up in an upbringing like that they really learn to kind of suppress their own needs. And that is what you see with clients who score high on these schemas. So let's go to the first one. And the first dysfunctional schema that can develop is the schema of self-sacrifice. I think that this schema often comes out quite high in a lot of clients. And this basically, in the definition, means that there is a preference to take care of other people instead of the self. And the Young Schema questionnaire measured this with items such as, I'm the only one who ends up taking care of other people. I'm a good person because I take care so much of other people. Other people see me as that I'm doing too much for others instead of myself. I'm always the one who listens to other people. And if we look at that schema, how does that typically develop? So it can be in very different ways. So sometimes we typically see that they had a parent who really modeled this behavior. So if you grow up with a parent who is very self-sacrificing themselves, maybe in their family unit or in the community, you kind of learn that that is normal behavior. Also, it can be when you have very controlling parents, when parents really are kind of in your neck, deciding your what you can do, what you can like, what you can't like, how you should act in front of their friends, your family. It can be that parents are very punitive, so that if you want to express more of yourself, it is rewarded with rejection, silent treatment, or verbally abusive. Another way is parentification. We already talked about it with the enmeshment schema, but of course, when a child is kind of forced into a role that is not emotionally and age appropriate, when they have a responsibility to take care of their parents, and this can be in a literally sense because their parent is sick, or because a parent has a mental illness. It can be in more subconscious ways that parents really are not aware of that they are doing this, that a child really feels that they have to take care of others. It can be that a parent really uses the kid as their emotional support system, and it can be that they have to take care of the household or siblings in a way that is not age appropriate, because of course it is okay for kids to have some responsibility, but parentification really means that a child feels that if I don't do it, it will have bad consequences for myself, for my siblings, and for my parents, and that is not normal responsibility for a kid or a teenager. It can also be that I already talked a bit about it, the silent treatment idea, that when a kid learns that when they do express themselves more, or their opinions or their needs, that it leads to disagreements, and then parents really retract themselves out of the connection. So someone really learns at a very young age that being yourself or asking for what you want can lead to a real loss of the connection. Then it is interesting to look at, okay, when the schema is activated in your client, maybe also yourself, it wouldn't come as a surprise that therapists often score a bit higher on this as well, is you can act as if the schema is correct, you can avoid the schema altogether, or you can act as if the opposite is true. So when you are more in the surrender or resignation part, you act as if the schema is true, and this means that you act in self-sacrificing ways. So you are probably helping a lot of people, maybe even when they didn't ask for it. You may be the one who listens a lot to other people, who has no idea about what their own emotional needs are. When they have free time, they immediately go taking care of other people. It's just a really focus on the needs of other people. When it is more of an avoidance, you don't want this schema to get activated. So you avoid relationships so that you won't feel that sense for self-sacrifice. When it is more talked about the overcompensation, this is this idea that instead of being self-sacrificing, you actually put your own needs in front of maybe the needs of other people. So you might become angry when other people won't help you or won't see your needs or ask about your opinion. And it can also be that you are becoming more rebellious and being like, F the world, I'm gonna do what I want. So in the new model, it kind of looks the same. A thing that I do want to point out is that I think a beautiful suggestion that they made, this is still kind of in research, is the more aggrieved child version, when they really talk about that you really feel that sense of grief, that this is how your relationships are, that you have to be the self-sacrificer in order to maintain these relationships. Furthermore, you see in the inversion kind of the self-aggrandizing part, where you really be like, hey, I want my demands also to be taken into account, and you do that into a more aggressive way. And this hyper-autonomy of being like, I'm not going to help anyone anymore, I'm just going to depend on myself. And I think this is also interesting that when healing a schema, sometimes we have to behave firstly in the opposite to kind of, sometimes you have to go from white to black in order to end up in the gray. And I think you see this also happening a lot, I think, on healing of self-sacrificing, for example, on social media, when people say, hey, I enter my villain era. I always feel that might be much more this idea that, hey, I'm now going to put myself in front of other people, and I'm going to become a bit more hyper-autonomous in order to heal that sense of self-sacrifice. And sometimes that can be needed in a way of needing time from away more from other people to develop that sense of identity, which is often lacking with self-sacrifice. Then we go to the second schema, and that is the schema of subjugation. And I think it is important to say the self-sacrifice and subjugation can really coexist, but in the basis, subjugation has much more this component of doing this not because necessarily you want to take care of others, but you really feel that if you don't do this, it will have very negative consequences. So it is much more compliance out of fear of negative consequences. And those negative consequences can be rejection, abandonment, abuse, emotionally, physically, or sexually. So this is much more that sense of feeling very threatened or intimidated. And that means that you will act more submissive. So it has more this sense of unsafety towards it. The Jung Schema questionnaire measures this with items such as, I think that if I do what I want, I will get into trouble. I feel as if I have no choice of to do it like this, because if I don't give into the wishes of other people, they might retaliate, get angry, or abandon me. In relationships, I usually let other people have the upper hand. I let people make choices for me, so I don't really know what I want. And I have a lot of trouble demanding that my rights and needs are taken into account as well. When we look at how does this schema develop, it can be a bit in the same environment as if we just talked about, but I would say that this has a much more intimidating and maybe abusive tone towards it. So that, for example, the punishments were much greater than just rejection, but also maybe you were really verbally abused, you were ashamed, or your parents just were very rigid in their control or in their authoritarianism. It can also be just physical, and being physically or sexually abused can lead to this schema. Very guilt-inducing parenting, or more the enmeshed parenting. Here you can see what kind of environments lead to this. And I think that when clients score high on this schema, at least a little light bulb goes up in my head more to really talk more about that sense of unsafety that they probably have felt. And it could be that they aren't really that much aware of it yet, that they feel that sense of threat or unsafety. And it is important, I think, to very closely monitor how their current relationships look, and if they feel like this with their current romantic partners, with their boss or friends as well. Then how does the schema activation look? So when the schema gets activated, how does someone behave? And when someone acts as if the schema is true, they most act in compliant way, so in a very submissive way. By choosing partners who can be very dominating, controlling, or might even be abusive or unsafe in a certain way. This can also be with friends or with a job, for example, working for a boss who has these components in their character, and in general, just being compliant with other people's wishes. When it is much more about the avoidance of this schema, you avoid relationships altogether because you don't want to be in a situation where you have to be compliant. And the overcompensator is a bit similar to the self-sacrificing in a way that you become maybe more rebellious. Like you're like, I'm not compliant, I'm going to do what I want, or more in a passive-aggressive way. Or also the hyper-autonomy, just to be like, hey, I'm going to put myself first. I become hyper-autonomous, I don't need other people. In the new model, you can also see it like this. And again, I think what they do very well in the new model is kind of making the vulnerable child really tied towards the schema. So in this case, it would be the intimidated child, which is a bit different from the self-sacrifice, where it's much more the parentified child, which doesn't necessarily really have to have this idea of immediate threat towards the child. Then we go to the schema of approval seeking, which is this idea that one's worth or significance is tied towards how other people give them reassurance or attention. The Jung Schema questionnaire measures this with items such as having money and knowing important people make me feel worthwhile. Accomplishments are the most important to me if other people notice them. unless I get a lot of attention from other people, I feel kind of worthless. Lots of praise and compliments make me a worthy person. So it is really this idea that your self-worth is kind of attached to how other people see you. And if that is the case, it makes sense that you look a lot for being praised or liked by other people, because you want to feel good about yourself. And if you need other people for that, people really start to focus on, I need that kind of compliments from other people. I need to be seen by others. How does this schema typically develop is, for example, if a child grows up in an environment where this is really modeled, where parents really found it very important to be seen, to be heard, to have, like, for example, a public life, or to get a lot of praise. It could be that there was a high emphasis on pleasing others, so that a child doesn't really learn, I can be myself. No, you had to be a product for the environment. So with image, reputation, or harmony prioritized. So you had to be what your parents thought would get you appraisal or compliments. It could also be that parents were not really interested in your emotion. You just had to be smiling a lot and be like the good girl or the good boy, and that is it. And it can also be that your parents were kind of emotionally immature and needed your approval a lot. So when someone acts as if this schema is true, you mostly will see them kind of seeking out admiration or approval from other people, and mostly linked to the things that they value themselves for. For example, the looks, the status, some achievements. In avoidance, you often see people kind of avoiding relationships in where they won't be able to gain that approval from other people. And the overcompensating is that you act as if the opposite is true. And in this case, it is much more this idea of, I don't need any attention or approval from other people. I'm above that. Or it can be more the hyper autonomy again, that you feel like, hey, I'm just on my own. It is a bit different than the self-aggrandizing, because in this way, you don't really feel that you are above it. It is much more this idea of just not getting into interactions with people. Also an interesting schema. When we look at the new model, it looks kind of the same. And here you can see that. I'm not going to in it in very much depth, because it is still under revision. A lot of research is being done right now. I just think it is nice for you to see it. And if you want to look more into it, go to the article that is linked in the beginning. And then we go to the positive schemas, because the model is under revision with a lot of research, but luckily there's also more research towards positive schemas, which means that how does it look when this need is properly met? And there are two schemas that are linked to when people really feel that their emotions, needs, and opinion were valued and were kind of encouraged by their parents. And you see that in self-directedness. So what I think of myself matters more to me than what others think of me. And not in a very, like, I would say, self-aggrandizing way, but in a secure way, that you feel like, hey, it's not about what other people think about me. It's more important to me that I like myself and that I enjoy myself. And when things go wrong, I look at myself. What do I think of this? And the other is the healthy self-interest and healthy self-care, is that I work hard, but I also leave time for relaxation and fun, so that you can properly prioritize your needs as well. When we look at how they are linked, it's not very high. You see with healthy self-interest and self-care, it is 0.22, 0.22 and 0.38. So it has the highest correlation with subjugation, and self-directedness is on a 0.52. And in general, in the articles about positive schemas, it is important that it is not on a continuous scale. It is really separate constructs. So it would also make sense that it's not necessarily that they have to be linked towards each other very highly. Important domain, because I think that you often work within this domain with clients as well, that they really learn how to build up a language for their own needs, for their own opinions and their own emotions. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you have any additions, let me know. And have a good day. Thank you for being here. Bye.